Going to start talking about Andrew Jackson today. A little bit of background on him because he is a pretty interesting guy. He grew up on the border between North and South Carolina, very rural area. No one's exactly sure which state it was in. Why this is important, it tells us he was a Southerner, which it's important to understand that perspective. Before he was born, 3 weeks before he was born, his dad died at the age of 29. By the time Jackson was 13, his mom and two brothers had died. The brothers died in the Revolutionary War. Jackson himself had been captured by the British, and he had survived smallpox. So pretty tough upbringing, to say the least. He was a self-made man. What I mean by that is he came from nothing, extremely poor. He was an orphan, and he makes his way up to the White House. So it shows you he worked hard to get where he was. In the War of 1812, he becomes a war hero. He was fighting Native American tribes down in the South. Later, he becomes a lawyer. He did have, from the War of 1812, he had 2 bullets lodged in him for the rest of his life. One was in the chest, one was in his chest, and the other was in his arm. His nickname was Old Hickory because he was so strong-willed. He was famous for not bending. What I mean by this, he was very, very stubborn. Once he got something in his mind, he was not changing his mind. One time when he was practicing law, he knocked out a tax dodger with a piece of wood. As a military commander, he executed men who disobeyed his orders. There was one battle in 1813 where a lot of his men that he was leading, they threatened to go back to Tennessee because they didn't want to fight anymore. So Jackson rode out his horse in front of them, pulled out his musket, and threatened to kill anyone who continued towards Tennessee. No one did because they knew he was serious. He would do that. Rumor has it that he participated in over 100 duels in his lifetime. He also was the first president to have an assassination attempt on his life. He was, I believe, coming back from a funeral, and there was a guy, I don't recall his name. He was an unemployed worker from England, and he blamed Jackson for losing his job. So he walked up to Jackson, pulled out a pistol, but it misfired. He had a second pistol on him, pulls that out. It also misfired. Once that happened, Jackson, I think he was 67 at the time, Jackson went up to him and proceeded to beat him with his cane. So very, very interesting guy. In this unit, we're going to look at the good and the bad of what he did when he was president. And as you guys, I think you know this, but presidents do good things and they do bad things. It's not like a president just does all bad things or all good things. So pay careful attention to this because at the end of the unit, you're going to do an activity looking at both his successes and his failures. One common theme with Jackson is what is known as Jacksonian democracy, or the idea that common people, not just the rich and educated, should participate in the government, which was a complete change from some of the previous presidents. Okay, so we're going to quickly look at Andrew Jackson and voting rights. And it reads, how did Jackson allow more people to vote? Before we answer that, we need to define this term. And you'll see this term around today. Suffrage is the right to vote. So prior to Andrew Jackson being president, who could vote was very limited. It was just white men who owned property or paid taxes. So the translation here is wealthy. You needed to be wealthy to own property or pay a significant amount of taxes. So there were a lot of poor white men that could not vote. I don't have it in there, but also age requirements at the time you had to be 21. So Jackson didn't think that this was right. So he's going to make some switches or help get some switches passed. And after Jackson, it's going to change to most white men could vote. You didn't have to own property or the tax thing. So now poor white men could also vote. And I think we can understand his perspective because he was someone that didn't come from all that much. So he fought for them to get voting rights. At the same time, this was progress, but we're still a long ways away from what we know today. Women, African Americans, and Native Americans are still unable to vote. How long is it going to take? The next group to get the right to vote were African American men. That was around 1867, so another 40 some years. Women, 1920-ish, I think. And Native Americans, I don't think got the right to vote till the 1930s.